This screencast is about business process re-engineering, its origins, successes and failures. So we'll look at the origins of business process re-engineering first. Business process re-engineering was coined in a seminal work by Dr. Michael Hammer of MI Sloan School of Management in the 1990s. It has since come to be looked at as business process management, and you could define these two items, BPR, as an organised group of related activities that together deliver customer value. More recently, business process management has been termed the distillation of related activities into specific business processes that, properly managed, allow a company to operate as a profitable entity. So we see business process management as the more modern form of business process re-engineering. Hammer and Champy's book in 1993, which you can pick up for something like £9. It's quite a cheap book. This was the thing that started the re-engineering revolution, and Hammer coined this phrase: "Don't automate (brackets existing systems), obliterate, and start from scratch, taking a process view of what should happen in a company." So if you want to buy that book, then there's the ISBN number for it. So why apply business process re-engineering? Well, firstly, it looks at a company as a series of processes and doesn't particularly rely on its core competencies. Obviously, the company has to have certain core competencies that are, that define its products and make them competitive in the marketplace. But what business process re-engineering does is it tries to bring in efficiency and to do away with data silos and people resisting processes. So it gives the processes that are happening within the company the importance, and not the functional departments that now, in a process orientation, supply services to it, such as people or resources or cash. An example of business process re-engineering in the early stages was just-in-time manufacture, which put the stock for a particular process not at the company itself that was using those supplies, those materials, but through a good relationship with the supplier, had the supplier hold those stocks on a fairly short call-off period, so that they could be delivered to the company that needed them for the production in a very rapid manner. So just-in-time manufacture, the materials needed for manufacture would arrive fairly soon before the process actually was started. So that's an example of business process re-engineering turning into something other. Opportunities for business process re-engineering. One thing that has had a major impact is the development of outsourcing, and this has looked at the consolidation of processes into what's called shared services. So if you are in a position where you can look at processes that happen, so for example in human resource management, if there are people who provide services to different divisions and perhaps can be put into one global service, then they can just as easily be delivered from outside the company as in it. And that's where outsourcing has developed from. It's been expanded by the fact that you can now, with the cloud, you can have services being brought in from web-based companies. It's also been used to bulldoze resistance to change. So if you're experiencing during a big change project a certain amount of resistance to what's going on from one particular area, then if you can look at that as an outsourcing target and temporarily outsource the whole function, that resistance is taken out, and you can then, if you choose, bring that that business back into house later on, by perhaps reviewing the outsourcing and saying it wasn't as successful as you were expecting. So outsourcing can be a way of driving through a strategy. Business process re-engineering done well can really improve the net worth of a company. What you're trying to do is you're trying to achieve efficiencies through faster services, a faster time to close the books, and lower costs. If you can have lower costs, then you have higher margins, obviously, and that cash that's freed up can be used to invest in other products. That will generate loyalty with clients, and you can have better interactions with your suppliers. The whole supply chain will run much better, and the most effective supply chain in the world is that of Apple Corp, or Apple Inc. Sorry, who have really prospered on the basis that their supply chain is so quick and efficient. IBM did a global process change. One of the problems they had was that the delivery of new products to market became bogged down in local customization of the product to meet the local industry that was done by product managers in the target countries. So they decided that to combat this, and also to improve, reduce costs, that they would effectively take the power away from the unit managers who were doing the local customization. And so they created a corporate executive committee and a business process executive. This forced the unit managers to collaborate with the business process executive when a conflict arose over standardizing a process or allowing it to be tailored for special circumstances. And IBM achieved a saving of $9 billion and a 75% decrease in the time to market for new products through this initiative, which really just was focusing on the process and preventing functional areas from causing delays and that weren't necessary, and sometimes led to more difficulty in implementing the product as well. Texas Instruments, they were looking to be faster to market, and so they used business process re-engineering to streamline product development. They did this successfully by taking the budgets away from the functional departments who previously had kind of held up developments of their products, and whilst they the functional areas still remained learning centres, the budgets were allocated by process across departments, and therefore the power was taken away from those who would block the problem. And this led to a 50% time reduction in bringing new products to market for TI. In Russia, there's a truck maker called KAMAZ. They brought in Siemens Consulting to see if their product development process could be improved, and they also tried to improve their supply chain. So they brought in a Siemens to do a logistics improvement project where underutilized production space and product designs were improved. So better product designs and a better use of production space. The project, which was completed in 2006, led to a 63% rise in earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization to $300 million. So it was a big success, and it just shows what can be done with a properly organised project. Cisco also. Cisco at one time made 60% of the world's routers, so the kind of junctions on the internet. And but the problem with that was that this massive growth of sales that they had was global, and they suddenly were taking large sums of money in from their 63 subsidiaries in 28 different currencies, and with exchange rates changing all the time, this could make a major difference to their profitability. One currency depreciating just after they'd taken a big contract, for example. So they needed to find a way of having these trading systems be made more efficient, and they did that by creating something called the Orbit project. So with the Orbit project, they tried to eliminate rekeying. So in the pre-Orbit situation, you can see the grey line here in the graph. Down at the bottom, exposure reporting, exposure submission, all these different steps were involved in the process of bringing through or transferring value in terms of cash from different denominations of currency back to the headquarters. And a lot of it required a lot of rekeying in different departments around the world. With the Orbit project, they made a universal system where there was no rekeying, and all these different steps were done within one system. In other words, reducing 12 steps down to one. And so this had a lot of impact in terms of making things more accurate, and there was much more acceptance that they were getting the right figures, and the figures were accurate. It was an efficient process. They could do analytics on it to see what was happening, trend analysis on different revenues coming in, and the currency exchange rates, etc., that were being achieved. It was scalable because it could be put across the world, and it led to a lot of cost savings. So Cisco's Orbit solution was another BPR solution that was very significantly responsible for a good result. Business process re-engineering failures, and there have been notable ones, usually result from an insufficient focus on processes, poor planning, inadequate communication between teams, lack of employee involvement, lack of management perseverance. Quite often a project can fail if other priorities intervene in management's viewpoint. Headcount reductions, and sometimes what was labelled a business process re-engineering project was really just a headcount reduction by another name, and that got BPR a bad name in some companies. And sometimes a big bang change like business process re-engineering is not appropriate, and that continuous improvement, Kaizen change, might have been a better course of action. And you sometimes have overzealous improvers, people who are really convinced that the big bang and putting everything in their image and how they'd like it would actually be a good thing, but it can damage the company. So you have to be careful with BPR. Here are some of the areas that can be improved in an improvement process. This is a RummlerBrache leader survey, and notice that the most important thing is to improve the process. Something like 78% of those involved thought that was the or 78% of those involved thought that was the most important thing, and you can see all the other ones there. Management development, culture change is very important too, etc. So looking at successes and failures, is business process re-engineering still a useful technique for business? I took this report from Al-Mashiri and Zari, and the diagram here, which you can get from if you go and Google that reference, is very good at kind of being a checklist for all the things that you would look at in terms of achieving success and failure. Mainly these involve change of management systems, a change of company culture, management competence and how well they can drive through change, organizational structure and whether you have too narrow a structure, and IT infrastructure to support these changes. All of these things are important, and we talked about in previous times. I've certainly looked at the changes in IT infrastructure that are necessary and helpful. So is BPR suited to efforts today? Well, some commentators have reported 50 to 70% of re-engineering efforts fail to deliver the intended dramatic results. Quite often the projects are quite successful, but they don't match up to the really overblown expectations that were set at the beginning. And so if you've achieved a 200% increase in output, but it wasn't a 300% as was predicted, then obviously that's not necessarily the success that you were hoping for, but still a very good success. Modern companies can learn from others' past mistakes, and so mistakes that were made in the past should lead to learning, particularly if you bring in change agents who have done these kind of projects before and are able to advise and make sure you don't make those mistakes again. Quite often just simple mistakes and not doing things at the right time can lead to problems with a business process re-engineering project. So verdict on BPR. BPR done with care is as valid today for process upgrades. Moreover, failure doesn't mean that re-engineering stops forever. So quite often projects kind of start and stop and get refocused. It's more a continuous process, even though it is a business process re-engineering project. As new techniques come in, but on the whole, so much learning has been done by companies that consulting companies and software vendors that BPR is now a very viable technique, even if it's more kind of like done more carefully as business process management. So to recap, it requires a focus on processes, not functions. If a company's big and rich enough to undertake clean slate re-engineering by starting from scratch, or they might do technology-enabled re-engineering of existing processes. The goal is to focus on processes, not functions. The other goal is to eliminate functional silos that maybe hoard data, hoard influence, hoard people, and kind of try and do their own thing within their own area. With a business process re-engineering project, and the same thing will be true when you introduce an ERP system for it the first time. You are really your aim is to do away with data duplication, data redundancy, bring in good quality change management, backed up by good executive commitment. But that can lead to really successful business re-engineering projects. And that's the end of this briefing. Thank you for listening.